Good afternoon, everyone. Today we will have a training on the coffee. Yeah, coffees are basically a very known beverage at the moment. And anyhow, my name is Rajiv. I am a F&B manager, and today we will do a discussion of small things as coffee. Now let's start with the history of coffee. As you can see, the history of the coffee is the coffee story begins with a very distinct story as such, which is saying like it's basically a goat, and at least it's a legend basically. Now, it has been said that the Khalki, an Ethiopian Godred, means they are just gathering the goat and they are just taking the goat farm as such. They have noticed that the goats become little bit of frisky after eating certain kind of shrub. Now that shrub was basically a coffee berry. Now that the shrub berry of himself, he just have it by himself, and he feel the buzz as well. So it's actually having a caffeine, so which strikes it. So that's how the future of the coffee was been secured. Now, originally, coffee was a food, not a drink. Earlier in the East African tribes, mixed of coffee berries, the unhulled beans, also called as coffee cherry, with the animal fat forming energy balls. Sometimes looks like primitive power balls, and they have been called as power balls because it is full of caffeines. The coffee also grew in the Arabian Peninsula, and it was there that it was first developed into a hot beverage. As you can see, it's in only in 1000 AD, and by the 13th century, the beverages actually been invented. And before that, the coffee beans has been used as a power booster food as such. So in the let's carry on with the 13th century. The Muslims were drinking coffee frequently as whirling dervishes of the early Islams may have been fooled by coffee. So the Arabic coffee are the most ancient part of the coffee, which you can say it has been invented. So let's go to the coffee varieties. There are two kinds of beans which are available in all around the world, and which is basically Arabica and Robusta. Now, Arabica and is a very high quality beans, which you can see in the picture itself. It's a little bit longer in size, little bit of a lighter version in the color, and Robusta is a little bit of shorter in size and a little bit of darker in color. So both the beans are really good, but Arabica is basically beans which is comes in a higher quality. As you can see, Arabica is a descendant from the original Ethiopian coffee trees. The coffee made from its varieties of mild and aromatic. It's the king of coffee and account to have about 70% of the world coffee production. Now these coffee trees grows best in a higher altitude. So there are basically coffee beans comes in a higher altitude because the temperature has to be a little bit of cool, and the coffee trees are a little bit of big shrubs as such, so which can go up to a tallness of 6 to even 12 feet as well. So these are grown in a cooler weather. As of in India, you will find coffee trees mostly inside of beside Bangalore in India, because the temperature over there are more cooler. So these coffee trees grows best in the higher altitude between 2000 to 6000 feet from the sea level, which you can say 610 meters to 1829 meters. As Bangalore in that region, it's in the hills, in the plateau, it's a perfect weather for the coffee trees to grow. Mild temperature is also required between 60 to 75 degree Fahrenheit, which is like 16 to 24 degrees Celsius, which is really a good thing to have it in that particular climate in India. But of course, we will carry on. We will discuss more about the major countries which produced coffee beans as such. So let's carry on. About 60 inches, 52 centimeter of rain per year is required to have Arabica to grow. So the heavy frost will kill the Arabica coffee bean. So the temperature really does matter, the climate does matters to grow coffee beans, especially Arabica. Let's go to the second type, which is Robusta. Now, Robusta is a coffee tree which represents 30% of the world's market. The beans are smaller and rounder than the Arabica beans. Robusta is a hardier plant and can withstand with warmer temperature as well. So, which is like a 29 degrees centigrade. It can really grow in that climate as well. It can also been thrive in a lower altitude than Arabica. Robusta beans produce a bitter tasting coffee with about 50% more caffeine than Arabica. You will find Robusta coffee trees in Southeast Asia as well as in Brazil, but it's a nowadays the both the coffee beans are mixed and blended together. You will find 30/70, you will find 80/20, you will also find 100% Arabica, those who are very good quality expensive coffee, which you can have it as such. So the Robusta is making economical sort of coffee because it's quite cheaper as compared to the beans of Arabica. Let's move on. Now there are 10 different coffee producers all around the world, starting with Brazil, who has the largest coffee producer all around, then followed by Colombia, then Indonesia, Vietnam, Mexico, Ethiopia, India, Guatemala, Kodlov, and as well as Uganda. So they are the 10 major producing countries which can produce, basically they are producing the whole for the whole world as such. Let's move on. Now the basic, as we mentioned, we will discuss today the basic of the coffees. So the first basic and the mother of all coffees is espresso. Now espresso, what is espresso? Espresso is a very strong coffee, but what is exactly espresso is? Espresso is a coffee of Italian origin, brewed by forcing a small amount of nearly boiling water under the pressure through finely ground coffee beans. Espresso is generally thicker than coffee brewed by other methods, has a higher concentration of suspended and dissolved solids, which also produce a crema. Crema is the foam which is the having a creamy consistency, but it's also a coffee, but that's a crema is very much important for espresso. Espresso is also the base of other drinks such as cafe latte, cappuccino, cafe macchiato, mocha coffee, flat white, and as well as americano. So the espresso plays a very important role. As you can see, we are very much in espresso nowadays, but the origin is basically from Middle East, where the still now the Arabic coffees are really in a popular way. But we will not discuss much of the Arabic coffee now. And there is other brand which is also called a Turkish coffee, which is also a very stronger unfiltered coffee as such. We will also will discuss in our next classes as such, but for today it's espresso. And let's carry on what they derived, what are the different kind of coffee comes out of espresso. As you can see, the types of coffee which espresso can be used to produce is espresso itself, and then we have espresso macchiato. It's basically a little bit of milk foam comes on top of the espresso. They are both of them served in a very in espresso cup basically. And then we have espresso con panna, which have a little bit of whipped cream. It's quite tasty as such. If you are not fond of sugar, you can add a whipped cream on top of the espresso. It's really amazing taste. Then followed by our famous cafe latte and flat white, which are basically steamed milk with a milk foam as such. So in the flat white there will be no foam as such, but in cafe latte there will be a little bit of foam. Then we got cafe brew, which is also a half steamed and half and half is steamed with milk foam, and espresso, which is also a good coffee but not really hot. It's a warm coffee, so you might not find much of this over here in the Asian countries, because the Asian prefer to have a hot coffee. Then we have famous cappuccino, with the milk foam is a little bit higher than the normal steamed milk, which also the base is espresso. Then we have cafe mocha, which goes with the chocolate syrup along with the espresso, and then you can put a whipped cream on top. It depends on choices and all, but the same thing with the milk foam will be there as well with the steamed milk. And then we have our black coffee, which is americano, so which is espresso and a water only. So these are the basic good and famous Italian coffees, you can say, but it's world famous nowadays, and people tends to have it. And in the Middle East or in the Eastern, in the Arabic countries, the most popular are Arabic coffee as well as the Turkish coffee, so which is also a good coffee, that's which I have not mentioned it here. So these are the coffee which are available in the hotels in Asian countries, and even in all around the world nowadays, because of the popularity. So it's a regular black coffee in the front, then we have espresso and ristretto is a very typical, very strong coffee, very strong, you can say it's the half the quantity of the water which has been used to make ristretto. Now the coffee remains the same, 8 to 10 grams, depends on what kind of machine we have, and what is the brewer, how you want to make it. So but the ristretto is more stronger than espresso, and then goes with cappuccino and cafe latte. So these are the basic things which is quite famous as such. Now let me tell you one important thing, which is the caffeine quantity is less in ristretto, and which increase gradually with the addition of milk and water. So your black coffee or americano will have a more caffeine than espresso, and cappuccino and cafe latte will have a more in quantity of caffeine. So if you are a caffeine conscious and if you love coffee, go to change your habits to have a ristretto, which is will be quite been good for health, and as well as you can find it much more good, less acidic for your body. Let's go. We do have one more option, which is a decaffeinated coffee. Is the coffee beans itself, which will be all the caffeines will be washed up by, we do have a good technique as such, so which before the roasting of the coffee beans happens, so the coffee it's been washed up the caffeine, so you can still enjoy the coffee without the caffeine totally. But of course it's a we need to use a little bit of chemicals in there, and so decaffeinated coffee can be made as such in the factories, which has been very popular for the few people as such. Some people has an allergy with caffeine, so they can go for the decaffeinated coffee as such. So if you have any questions, you can just put a comment below. We can able to do a lot of trainings as such with the similar way for yourself, for your company, waitresses, for the freshers, for the colleges. So please do comment below, and if you need anything, myself and our hotel will able to help you out to give certain kind of specific trainings as such. So thank you very much for your time, and hope to see you again, and we will do trainings like this nearly about every day. Thanks for joining in the live session. Bye.